When Ontario students return to their classrooms after all the disruption of COVID, the safety everyone was concerned about was related to the ongoing pandemic. But as a walkout by students at one Toronto high school recently made clear, violence inside those schools and on the nearby streets is now also a real concern, and it goes well beyond the capital city. Tia Ryan Matthias is a grade 11 student at York Memorial Collegiate Institute, where that protest took place, and she's going to join us now and tell us a little bit about what's going on. Tia, thanks for coming in. We're really grateful.
Thank you, Steve.
Well, talk about this, the violence and the destruction that you are seeing at your school. Describe it for us, if you would.
The violence at Memo is clearly chaotic. There's so much things happening and so much disruption that each and every one of us encounters every single day. There's not much we can really do about it, but just hope that it goes away or we won't be a part of it or see it.
Describe it for me, though, Tia. What kind of stuff's going on?
Fights happening. Teachers are just constantly getting picked at by students.
Where does it happen?
Classrooms, halls, the hallways majority of the times, or sometimes in the bathrooms.
Students are fighting in the bathrooms?
Yes.
Fist fights?
Yes, brawls are happening. Sometimes they would lock the bathroom because fights would occur in them.
So that way the staff can't get in to break it up.
Yeah.
People getting badly hurt?
I'm not too sure about that, but it seems like from the videos, they get hurt.
Oh, this is a new thing from your day as opposed to my day. You guys actually video these fights, right?
Yes.
And then you put them up on what, TikTok or something?
People would put them on social media, or they would just share it amongst their friends.
I presume it's kind of scary going to school these days. Is that fair to say?
Yes, very, very much.
Yeah.
You really don't know if you might be a part of it, or if you stare at these students, will they say, "Oh, why are you looking at me?" Or do you want to fight? It's just, you gotta keep your head down and just pray that you don't get caught in the fights.
And so far you have not, I guess.
No.
No, you like to keep your distance.
Yes, I like to keep my distance.
Gotcha. Is it always students from your school, or are there other schools that send students over as well, or what?
Not most of the time. It really happens, but there have been times where other schools came to our school and they would just fight, and sometimes it wouldn't really involve Memo students. But there was this one time a fight happened from a different school happened at our school, so it was just a bit complicated there.
Tia, is it always just fists? You know what I'm saying here? Like,
Yes.
Are guys bringing knives to these fights or stuff?
They would bring threats saying that they will. I'm not sure if this was related to what happened before, but we had a lockdown, and students said they were bringing a gun, and we were on lockdown for an hour and 30 minutes, I believe so. But the police didn't find no weapon on the students, so we were allowed to leave. But for now, there hasn't been that much weapons or anything involving fights that I know of.
How worried are you that as this escalates, students are going to start bringing knives and guns and other weapons?
Very worried because I don't know, and sometimes I don't have classes. My teachers are not here, and there's no supply teachers. So we would have to relocate into the CAF or the library, and sometimes I or my friends, we don't want to go to the CAF because nobody's there, and there's nothing you can do. And the library is packed with other students that don't have no classes as well. So I'm afraid that lockdowns might happen while I'm in the halls, and I might not be able to find a class that has a teacher in it.
I presume you want to go to school to learn stuff.
Of course, yes.
And I also presume that it's pretty hard to learn when you're in fear. Is that also fair to say?
Yeah, you lose a lot of motivation to do your work. Well, for me, I've lost so much motivation to do my own work, which is building up on me and taking a toll on me as well. So.
How so? What kind of toll?
Stress. Plus, accommodatings are happening, summatives are happening, and I haven't done much of my assignments.
I'll translate there because we never had these words when I went to school. But summatives, I've learned this from my kids. Summatives are these are assignments and so on that you've got to get in, and it's hard to get them in when you can't learn.
True, yes.
Okay. I want to know if you blame anybody for the way things are.
I blame both the TDSB and the students. TDSB for not listening to both Harvey's and Memo students.
For not listening to what?
To Harvey and Memo students. Our parents, just the community in general. And the students for just not adapting to the change and just being selfish about everything. We all have our own differences, which is understandable, but we're all in this together. And if one person suffers, then the whole entire school suffers. And we just need to learn our differences and come together and put everything aside to be one school and not be rivals.
We should just explain for people who live outside Toronto, your school actually is the amalgamation of a couple of schools, right?
Yes.
So you've got a lot of people in that school you never knew because they were at another school. So you got to find a way to come together.
Yeah, when I was at Scarlett, when Memo was at Scarlett, we didn't know each other, but we knew each other. So that feeling where we were family was there. But now coming to this school, it's very off.
Right.
You don't feel welcomed. You don't feel safe. This aura around it just feels dark.
Let me ask you one last thing. Would you feel safer if there was a police presence in your schools all the time?
Yes, 100%. The police just being there or being outside, just making sure that students are safe would make me feel a lot better than just being outside, probably talking to my friends if something might happen and there's nothing for me to do or it's nothing that I can do.
Tia, I'm going to continue the conversation with some folks on the other side of the studio, but I really want to thank you for coming in and sharing your views about this, because I think you've given us a lot to think about. You've experienced it, so we're really happy to get your views on this. So thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, let's get a wider view of how common such situations are and what can be done about them, starting in Wakefield, Quebec, with Chris Bruckert, professor at the University of Ottawa in the Criminology Department. She's written 2 recent reports on violence in Ontario schools. In Port Hope, Ontario, Wendy Goods, a retired elementary school teacher. And here in our studio, Anna Sideropoulos, parent of 2 students at Birchmount Park Collegiate Institute, where she sits on the parent council. Tesfaye Mengesha, executive director of operations at Success Beyond Limits. That's a youth-led, community-based group that provides academic and social supports to Toronto youth. And Eitan Laufer, a high school teacher currently seconded as an occupational health and safety inspector for OSSTF. That's the Ontario Secondary School Teachers Federation. And we're grateful to have you 3 here in our studio and our 2 guests in Points Beyond to join us for, oh my gosh, what a timely and important discussion. Eitan, to you first. We just heard what Tia said. Give us the broader view. What kind of violence are we seeing in schools today?
Yeah, I think we're seeing quite a wide spectrum of violence occurring both amongst students and towards staff throughout TDSB schools. And I think we're seeing physical violence, assaults. I think we're seeing verbal threats of violence. And I think we're seeing the grouping of students to be used as kind of an intimidation and harassment tactic. And I think something that's really important and interesting to note at this time is if we compare the first 3 months of last school year to the first 3 months of this school year, the incidence of workplace violence that are reported has gone up over 40%. And so we can see that there's a really wide spectrum of violence occurring, and we can see that it's increasing quite rapidly.
Yeah, I don't want to minimize this, but that kind of makes sense in respect. I mean, they weren't in class a year ago, right? So that's not surprising.
No, not at all. And I think it's one of those multi-layered challenges that we're experiencing both at the local school level and across the school board. And I think our response needs to be multi-layered as well.
Okay, we'll get into that as we go along here. Chris, I know there's always a temptation outside the capital of the city to say, well, that's a Toronto problem, but it's only a Toronto problem. I guess you're here tonight to tell us it's not only a Toronto problem?
It's not a Toronto problem. It's a school problem. It's not only a high school problem. It's an elementary school problem. This is To hear that it's gone up 40% is really disturbing. It also has to be taken into consideration that the rates were already really high. When we did research, we got rates of, 70% of EAs experience an act of violence in a single school year. So a 40% increase is truly alarming because we're starting at a really high rate already.
Wendy, I know you're retired now, but did you see this kind of violence when you were teaching?
Oh, most definitely. And small rural community, it happens in every classroom. I had a colleague last night share with me that a kindergarten student at his wife's school held another student up against the wall and punched her in the face so hard that her lip split.
Now, this is a male student doing it to a female student?
I'm not sure of the gender, but it was two kindergarten children, so
Oof.
senior kindergarten children. So it happens at all ages and happens frequently and on a daily basis.
Did you ever face violence in your 40 years of teaching yourself, you personally?
Oh, on a regular basis. I have a passion for working with special needs children that are behaviorally challenged. I had a student at one point come up to me and his fist came this far from my chin with deadpan eyes and said to me, "I'm going to kill you." Not long after that, his mother's arm was broken.
What did you do when you found yourself in that situation?
I was very calm. I was acting principal that day, so I wasn't in my classroom, but things happened in my classroom on a regular basis. I had a quote unquote regular class with 5 students that had safety plans in it. Safety plans are created when children are can possibly endanger other children. We frequently had desks being overturned, shelves emptied, any piece of furniture not affixed to something overturned. It's a regular occurrence everywhere in the province.
Yeah, let the record show. You're almost 2 hours outside Toronto, so this is not just a Toronto thing. Okay, Anna, here's a tough question. You've had multiple stabbings at your kid's school. And I want to know what it's like as a parent to send your kids off to school every morning knowing that.
Steve, it's really scary. And first of all, thank you for having me here. It's nice to have an opportunity as a parent to speak and talk, but it's really, really scary.
You fear for them every day they go out the door?
I believe that it was targeted. However, you never know if your child's going to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Right. The older one is desensitized. He said, "Oh, Mom, this is normal." And that in itself is scary. How is that normal? It's the second time it's happened in 7 months. The younger one, he's trying to be brave, but he wants to move. He's like, "Can we move out of here?" I said the same thing. The problem is everywhere. It's not just here. So yeah, it's really terrifying, and especially wondering what's going on. Why are we having a second stabbing? What did we not do the first time? To ensure that this wouldn't happen again.
That's a great question. Can you answer that question? Why is this happening so much?
I don't know. I'm wondering why the cameras are still not fixed at our school, why they're sitting there collecting dust and not being installed. I'm wondering why we're not talking to school council, why we're not having our chance to meet with the board, and I don't know why the safety audit hasn't been done yet. I mean, the second stabbing was a month ago, and we have yet to have a safety audit at our school.
What do you think's going on here?
I mean, I think I'd want to broaden the conversation a little bit and thinking about schools are a part of communities. And so as we see violence increase across the city of Toronto and communities, we're also seeing similarities in schools. And that is represented also in the TDSB safety report that was presented last week. And so it's really important to look at communities more broadly. If we have healthy, vibrant, livable communities that have affordable housing, meaningful employment, a livable wage, accessible transportation, access to nutritious foods, I think we'll have healthier communities, and it could address some of the issues that we're here discussing with regards to violence that are manifesting themselves in schools.
I have no doubt but that you're right, Tesfaye. But what you've just described, that agenda will take 10 years to achieve, if we ever achieve it. She needs some answers today.
Right.
How much of this do you think is happening because everybody went a little bit bonkers during COVID, and we were all locked down, and then, people weren't going to school, and now they're back in school, and we don't quite know how to react to it all.
Yeah, I think there was an adjustment period. At the beginning of COVID, I think everybody was adjusting. Teachers, students were understanding what it meant to be doing school virtually. And I think there's also an adjustment period to be back in school as well. Specifically, even for students that are going to high school this year for the first time, but they were high school students for two years. So I think there's an adjustment period for everyone. And I think that's what we're seeing right now, especially young people are young, growing up, and they're socially developing. And a part of that social development looked very differently when we were in a virtual space versus being in school, interacting face-to-face with young people as well, too. So I think that's a part of the challenge as well.
Okay, Eitan, can I get you to pick up on that? How much of this is we're still trying to figure out after isolation from COVID?
I think, to Chris's point about this being kind of a wider spread problem that's been going on for years, I do think that this is something that's been pervasive in schools as long as I've been in the school board and as long as I've been part of education. And so I think the way in which COVID is exacerbating it is some of those, as he spoke to, the socialization pieces, which are really challenging when kids are transitioning between one grade level and another. But something else that I think is happening that's part of this wider conversation is that we don't quite have the resources in schools to deal with those challenges head on a day-to-day basis.
Resources like what?
Whether it's social workers who students can reach out to, whether it's not-for-profit organizations that are embedded into school communities, which have a direct tie-in to what students are experiencing in their community. And we don't quite have the ratio of student to teacher that would make those environments really productive, in which teachers can put a little more time and a little more energy into those individual student relationships that make such a difference in the day-to-day experience. And so, I don't think the school board would argue that we're in desperate need of more resources, more funding to meet the needs. And that resource need gap that's occurring throughout the school board is one of the significant factors, I think, that's contributing to such an escalation in violence.
Okay, Chris, I want to come back to you, and I'd like you to react, if you would, to something Anna just said a moment ago, where she was mentioning that one of her children said, it's kind of normal. Violence has sort of been normalized in school. What are we to take from that?
Yeah, I think we're taking from that we're seeing a very disturbing normalization of this, where teachers are routinely told that this is part of the job. EAs are told it's part of the job. So I think this is really concerning, because we have a whole generation of children growing up seeing this and seeing it normalized. And I think as a result of that, one of the things that happens is kids aren't even telling their parents. So, kids are going home. It's so mundane. Of course, we have evacuations. Of course, the teacher was threatened, that they're not even going home and telling their parents. So I'm not even sure if parents are aware of the extent of violence in schools.
Wow. Well,
and that's...
I want to get Ann on that. Are you worried that your kids are only telling you half the story?
I think that does happen. When we had our school council meeting last week, we found out of a new thing that's going on now, where kids are airdropping things to each other, walking up to windows and airdropping things to people's phones. And I hadn't heard about that. My kids hadn't told me.
Sorry, what does that mean?
Airdropping. So if you have an iPhone.
Oh, no, I know what airdropping is.
So
if
I had an image or something that I want
Okay.
to scare you with, or something inappropriate, I would airdrop you, and it just show up on your screen, and you'd be scared or traumatized. This is the new thing that's happening. I didn't know. It had a principal not told us. My boys were fortunate enough that it was just something maybe funny that came to them, but it could be something really scary.
Wendy, one of the things you've talked about in the past is that you've started to see, or you did start to see, a lot of kids come to school with quote unquote baggage. What kind of baggage are you referring to there?
Many kids come to school and they have had a rough start to the day. There were fights in the household the night before. There were parents worried because one of their older siblings had disappeared somewhere. Lack of self-regulation skills. They don't know. And like some of the other panelists have said, the normalization of the violence that happens in the classroom, and the trauma that has on every student in the class, and it's a big one. Teachers and support staff workers are often blamed for a student acting out, an administrator will say, well, what did you do to cause that? That's not helping the child, and their needs just aren't being met.
Well, let me
Some of
follow up
them
with
don't
Tesfai
have-
on that, because I guess, if a kid comes from a violent home or a kid doesn't have breakfast before coming into school,
Right.
if violence is the normal state of affairs in that child's life, I guess we can't be shocked that they're going to act out when they come to school, right?
I think when there's a violent incident, a young person is communicating something. Something is not working for them, right? So I think the question is, what is it that's not working for them? And how do we ensure that we have environments in schools that are conducive to learning? And I think a part of it was the other guests had mentioned, the underfunding of schools in terms of the resources that are available to them, and ensuring that, again, that we have healthy communities where the students have everything they need to be successful in school, right? So, because, when they bring themselves into the classroom, they bring their whole self. So all the experiences that they have outside the school, the ways that they're living day to day, that manifests itself in school in the way that they might be able to learn and may have challenges learning as well.
Eitan, I presume secondary school teachers in this province are trained what to do if a student, as was the case with Wendy, sticks a fist in their face and says, I'm going to kill you. Are there any circumstances in which their training allows them to punch back?
Absolutely not. I think, the extent to which teachers are trained to deal with those situations, I think is maybe exaggerated. I think there is some training provided by school boards, and there's a lot of resources available to teachers. But when that moment comes, it's a completely different feeling. Very similar to the story that Wendy shared. I have been in that exact situation with the student very close to you and threatening you. And while you have some experience in some module that you received, that's a very different feeling. And how you respond to that is very personal and individual. And I think we hold teachers to a very high standard in how we expect them to respond by de-escalating, making the right choice, walking away. And I mean, to Anna's point, I think, there's such an underreporting of these kind of violent incidents that are occurring every day that we don't have a really clear picture of everything that's going on. And we need that reporting and we need that information so we can have a much better idea of what are those target spots we need to address.
Let me raise a complicated issue here, and Ann, I'll go to you first. Cops in schools, would you prefer that?
I think that before we can make any sort of decision like that, we need to consult with the parents. I mean, the parents have been left out of the conversation. The report that you mentioned was called the Collaborative Approach to School and Community Safety. Who was collaborated? The parents weren't collaborated with. We weren't even invited to the meeting.
So, well, you're on a parent council. You weren't part of this?
No, I invited myself. I delegated at the meeting. I made a presentation because I found out about it, and I went, but I wasn't invited to collaborate on the report. I would have loved to. We have, probably 500,000 parents. I mean, that's a lot of resources that we're not tapping into.
Okay, let me do the background here, which is that once upon a time in the city of Toronto anyway, there were some police in some schools because it was felt that they were needed there in order to bring down the violence that they were seeing. You will also not be surprised to hear that there were some parents who were thinking these cops are targeting minority kids and therefore another decision was made to get the cops out of the schools, for that and other reasons as well. Okay, let's get into this. Chris, do we need them back in school?
Police?
Yeah.
No, I don't think police have any place in our schools. Absolutely. I don't think police are the way to respond to a social problem. I think other guests, panelists have spoken about the fact that what we're seeing here is an acting out of unmet needs. And so we need to address that. We need more resources. We need more support. We need more EAs. We need more teachers. We need more assessments. We do not need more cops. Police end up, this is not a big shocker. We know what's going to happen if you bring police into schools and who's going to get targeted. No cops in schools, in my opinion.
Although, interestingly enough, Tesfai, you heard the interview with Tia before I came over here. She's a young black student. She said it's time for cops back in schools. What do you think of that idea?
You're going to get different perspectives in any community, right? There's going to be a diversity of perspectives. And so, then I mean, that's what she believes. But I will say from my own experience working in a school where we had a school resource officer for many years, what happens with an incident in a school, that doesn't happen in every school that across the board, is the ones that have police officers, the behavior that might be looked at as inappropriate, juvenile, unacceptable behavior in one school that doesn't have a cop, and in a school that has a cop becomes criminalized, right? So the young person is not only suspended, potentially expelled, but then they're going to also have to go through the criminal justice system, right? And that is happening disproportionately to Black kids, racialized folks, racialized young people. And so that has not worked in terms of stopping the violence in schools. What it's done is exacerbated issues that we see in schools where students are being pushed out and pushed out of the education system.
Although Vancouver has decided to bring police back into schools. Can you understand that decision?
I don't see police officers in schools as a way to keep students safe. Police oftentimes are dealing with situations after they arise, right? So it's not a preventative measure. I think we need to look at all the things that guests have mentioned in terms of what is a way that we can prevent violence in the first place and address the root causes of violence. And if we look at all the reports from the Roots of Youth Violence, it doesn't mention police in schools. To the Faulkner report after the death of Jordan Manor in 2007 does not mention police in schools. So that's not a part of the solution.
Okay. Eitan, how have we reached the point where apparently some kids think it's okay to bring a gun into a school?
That's a difficult question. I think the idea that it's one specific root cause or one specific problem, tries to simplify something that's very complex. I think there are things going on in communities throughout Ontario that are causing students to not feel that their school is a safe place, is a community place to go. And as soon as you create that detachment, then the idea that it's acceptable to bring violence into a school becomes something that students get comfortable with. If you encourage them to see school as a safe space, as a place where they are welcome, as a place where they are going to learn, the idea that you would even bring a weapon to school wouldn't even cross somebody's mind, because that wouldn't be an appropriate place to bring that kind of instrument.
All right, in which case, Chris, what about metal detectors in schools or in some schools? Do you like that idea?
Yeah, I think we're having the wrong conversation. I think, just to completely echo what the other panelists said, is we need proactive, not reactive. So no, I think we need to really address the root causes, and metal detectors are not going to do that either.
So for you, it's more resources, it's more money, it's more EAs, it's more teachers, it's all of that.
Yeah, it's looking at the root causes and addressing why kids are acting out. And I think we have to be careful with the language, because often when we're talking about violence, we're not talking about intent to hurt. We're talking about kids who are running out of words, who are acting out, who are not having their needs met. And so even the language of violence, which I use, we have to understand that doesn't mean that kids are violent, and therefore we need some kind of a punitive response.
And Anna, based on your experience here, how's that sound?
I would have to disagree with that, because I think stabbing another child is a violence. I think that it was intentional. It wasn't just they knew who they were going after. I mean, the kids were hearing rumblings of this all day. I think I agree that they need to step back and figure out why this is all happening. And there's a lot of stress behavior, not necessarily bad behavior, but this is the next point. This is violence.
More than acting out.
More than acting out. And I fully agree with that. I just spoke to another parent about self-regulation and offered a book that I had read, but this is violence. They're stabbing each other. There's a lot of causes, but I think, it's very complex, as you mentioned. But also, what is the school doing? Do we not have, the safety training? I'm really tired of the Toronto District School Board saying that it's a lack of resources. How about you tell us what you're doing with what you do have? Why aren't our cameras fixed? Why don't we have safety audits? Do we have training? Do we have threat assessment? The kids knew this was happening. Where's a place for the kids to feel comfortable to come talk and not feel like snitches? That this is going to happen at 3:15 after school in this hallway.
Right.
Right?
Just for the record, we asked a Toronto District School Board representative to join us for this conversation. You will notice there's nobody here. They said somebody was unavailable. So, listen, we're delighted you're all here, but we wish somebody had been made available as well. As you think about this, though, and the ideas we've heard for long-range solutions sound like great ideas, but that doesn't necessarily help you tomorrow. What are we going to do tomorrow to make sure when your kids go to school, you don't worry about them leaving the house in the morning?
Well, many parents that I spoke to, many parents of Black children have said, they're like, we don't want the police. We face racism every day, but this is a crisis. You know, we want our kids to come home alive. You know, so maybe we need them right now. That is what a lot of the parents that I've been talking to have said.
Okay, Tesfai, I know you're not a fan of cops in schools, but how about as a short-term interim solution?
I think the conversation that the board has been in terms of dealing with an immediate threat. They might be coming into schools, but it doesn't address the root causes. I think, like we said, I think that's what we really need to get to. Having someone that's permanently stationed in a school with a gun doesn't do anything for school violence.
Wendy, would you have liked to have seen police in your schools when you were teaching and facing the kind of threats that you were?
No. It doesn't address the root cause of the needs not being met. We had a program where we had a child and youth worker, a trial program, child and youth worker stationed at every school. And that person was responsible for handling de-escalation of our high flyers, if you want to call them that. Did programming and set up different groups. So that produced a therapy safe spot. This CYW also came in and did self-regulation programs in each classroom. That was a year where we saw decreased violence because we had somebody that was dedicated to that. Administration likes to sweep it under the rug. They normalize the filing of violent incident reports. They politicize it to the point where, in my opinion, I think they should be shouting from the rooftops that, hey, we have a crisis here and everybody needs to know how many violent incidents instead of trying to bury it.
Okay, to that end then, let me go to Chris and ask, Chris, if a child comes to school scared for his or her safety, are they able to learn?
Absolutely not. I mean, and teachers the teachers we spoke with in the research were incredibly distressed and spoke about kids who were so preoccupied. And you have to realize too that violence in schools, and my research was on elementary schools, so this may change the conversation a bit, but you know, evacuations are routine. We had teachers who had, a bin by the door so that if they had to evacuate the classroom, they could grab that bin and then they would go on what they called a library walk or a nature walk to try to they had to get the kids out. Well, if your day is being disrupted by, exiting the classroom, going on this nature walk, and then debriefing afterwards, that's a whole lot of learning that's not going on, in addition to the trauma of that experience. So absolutely not. And I know the educators I spoke to are totally distressed about this.
Eitan, does it go without saying that secondary schools are more violent places than elementary schools? Or should we not necessarily make that leap?
I think we're talking about very different environments, and so very different usage of the word violence and what that means. I think I would say that in secondary schools, we have a bigger problem of underreporting of violence than we do in elementary schools. I think that's a cultural component. And I think, to Chris's point, I think teachers' mental health is a huge challenge when we introduce workplace violence. I think something that I experience every day are calls and emails and connecting with my members who are experiencing mental health challenges as a result of different types of violence that they experience, especially violence in the form of threats and harassment. And that's becoming more and more pervasive as students kind of understand sort of the boundaries of, well, if I do physical violence, kind of the consequences can often be more serious, whereas if it's a threat or verbal harassment, it kind of gets pushed aside or not as taken as seriously. Right.
Speaking of boundaries, we've hit the boundary of our time. I want to thank all of you for coming in and sharing your views on what is a really tough subject. Chris Bruckert, Wendy Goods, Tesfai Mengesha, Anna Sideropoulos, Eitan Laufer. It's really good of all of you to spend so much time with us here on TVO tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.